Hello book lovers, welcome back to Pro Cabinet with Books. In today's wrap-up video, we are going to be discussing all the books that I've read in the month of March, and I've read around 16 books this month, few of which were digital books, audiobooks, graphic novels, comics, all sorts of books. It had a lot of variety, if nothing else. I even talk about the non-fiction books that I read. It absolutely had a great arena. I read 5 different types of non-fiction books plus all the different varieties in fiction as well, from historical, contemporary, fantasy, murder mystery, and whatnot. There's a whole array, so I'm pretty sure at least one would correlate with the kind of book that you are looking forward to it. So without any further ado, let's quickly jump into the video. First book on our non-fiction list is under the category of leadership and management, which is The Glass Cliff. The concept is pretty known now, especially in regards to the glass ceiling workshops and everything that occur in many corporate houses across the world. The Glass Cliff relates to the improper treatment at workspace that happens for any XYZ reason, that can include gender disparity or even racial discriminations, and this has been verified by different numbers into the book where the discrimination is but obvious. So anyone who is basically not a white man on this earth will have come across such disparities across in their career, and the book actually discusses at length at what particular status such disparities do occur. What I don't like, however, or I would have expected the book also to be addressed, was how to actually overcome that in a greater sense and not just a common nolarity kind of fact stating statements in the book. And that's why it wasn't something that I enjoyed very much, though I did find it very brainstorming. For the very least, you would be thinking that it's an eye opener for you, but besides that, I don't think it really addresses the problem. It calls out to the problem, but the solution finding path is a little less talked about in the next on our list is Wonder Woman, and this one particularly is the apt kind of book that I really look forward to read when I read a non-fiction book. This comes under the category of self-help, travel, and many other smaller areas that the book addresses. Primarily, it's about addressing women who would like to travel solo across the world and how we are already making 90 to 95% of travel decisions even when it comes to others. So why not implicate ourselves with those decisions and as well? And the most important fact that the book addresses is how so many people just suppress the feeling that you would like to travel the world by saying that it might not be safe, and rather than making things out there safe, you are simply asking us to stay indoors, which is not really the right approach. And if I had to pick a green tick about this book, is the way that the book addresses, acknowledges the problems in the society today, and also offers you a solution path or a counter approach regarding that situation, is what makes this book a great read for me. A Mystery from the Mummy Pits is a great mystery story around the overall mummification process, in specific regards to a particular mummy called Ang Hap. I'm not even sure if that's the right pronunciation, but that's what the book is about. This is under the history non-fiction category of the book, and overall the book was great, informative, and pretty eye-opener from various regards to what happens behind the scenes of when you actually see a mummy in the museum. Everything that happens before that, the black marketing, the transportation, the rigorous handling of those packages, and all those things are addressed deeply into the book. What I did not enjoy in the story was the kind of construct of the story that was laid down. The overall structure of the book did not make sense because we were talking about certain topics in different areas rather than addressing them all at once, or going through a particular storyline concept. We were just picking out random topics and just talking about them, which made the experience a little sour for me. But since I've been an Egyptology fan for a very long time, I thought it's a must read, and I did read it, and I'm not sure if I would recommend it. Up next, we have Hidden Places, which was such a fabulous book from reading and viewing perspective, because a maximum of 180 plus pages in this book were majorly pictures around the globe. The places that this book addresses are pretty non-cliched pictures and places that are mentioned in here, because when you think about a particular country regarding its travel plans, it does not address those common and mainstream areas to visit. It actually looks across the globes and tries to find those hidden places. That's what the title suggests, right? And that's what it's trying to address as well. Those hidden beauties that are there in different countries, and with that will absolutely change your perspective towards those countries, especially related to few particular ones which have a very clean niche of tropical countries and beaches, and there they address these hidden areas across the mountains, which is such a beauty to look at. Plus the book is also very beautiful, so it will do good as a display book as well as a coffee table book too. And if you would like to know more about the story and the book, I've done a full review on this book and the topics that it discusses, so you can go check that out as well. We have The Witch of New York, which is a true crime non-fiction story. So it's based upon the real story of a Polybidine whose trials were done at a very lengthy exposure and detail, and still the jury was not able to come to the right conclusion for various reasons. The whole case is explained, and this is like a legal battle reading that you would be going through. And personally, while the story was very intriguing, the experience of reading this book and experiencing the grief that the protagonist in here went through was not something that I would probably want to re-experience ever again. And this is one reason why I'm very skeptical when it comes to true crime and how people are actually obligating it as a mode of entertainment, and it does not really make sense in my mind, at least, to make it a form of entertainment and publish books related to true crime. I think a detailed outright article would do just fine, rather than monetizing it and commercializing it in so many aspects just feel wrongs to me. In a murder mystery category, the first book that I read was The Other Lola by Ripley Jones. He had also written The Missing Clarissa last year, and that was another great book, so I definitely had to pick this up. This is a follow-up story of the two main protagonists who actually investigated the Missing Clarissa case, and they did a podcast in the last book. And now they are facing the consequences of doing that podcast because many people are approaching them with wrongful intentions, and they do think that since they feel that police is not doing the job right and they had to take matters in their own hand, they are now being threatened by various means, so they don't have police on their side and they don't even have a lot of public on their side as well. And in this particular book, there is a new missing person called Lola, and her younger sister approaches them to investigate the case, and they already have a straight no scenario, but she's really pursuing them and they might just have to pick this case up. This book was such a cute middle grade mystery thriller in legal category book that I would definitely be rereading this book. I absolutely fell in love with the character and the house and Maddie's ghost for that matter, wherein she was actually hinting her to, find the missing pieces of the puzzle and solve the whole story. Long story short, a new person is living in this house where she shifted, and she knows that her granny used to live in this house, and she feels that the ghost of her nanny is chasing her and poking her in a particular direction. And then she suddenly feels that maybe they were hanged for the wrong reasons for the crime that they did not commit, and now she's simply looking into those legal matters and trying to find the truth behind the scenarios that happened hundreds of years ago and just rest the case in peace for once. Final book in mystery thriller category is King Next, and though this might not feel like a thriller, at least to me, because the book wasn't that fast paced, it was decently paced. The story here is about a mystery regarding an island. Now, two different professors, or research professors for that case, who were doing research on separate topics in their own field, are invited to do their research and complete their thesis and write a book around it on the island of a very rich person, and he invites them to do the research and he's funding the whole research. And while they're there, as soon as they land, they knew that nobody else would be residing on that island because it's that rich person's island who has madly driven into his scientific society sort of thing. But they do feel that there's a shadowy presence wherever they go, and there is someone else on the island apart from them. So there is this spooky, goofy feeling that you get while reading this book, which creates sort of horror vibes, but there isn't a ghost, so you don't need to worry about that. But the angle through which a scientific approach, the research papers, and the mystery of automatons and bots that have been created by the owner has been reflected into the story makes it a very unique kind of read for me. Next book is a memoir, and it's a contemporary based memoir at that. And it was a very difficult title to read, honestly, though the book is not very long, it's hardly 226 something pages. I think not more than 250 for sure. But I had to take a lot of breaks while reading this book because the story is very heavy. It's about an Asian girl living in America, losing her only parent who was there throughout her life, supporting her by various means, and now she has lost her, and how she's coping up with the grief in different scenarios, and how she's learning to respect her culture and the places where she has come from. Whereas initially she just used to look at those things as spite, and now her whole perspective has changed, and how that is impacting the decisions that she's now taking in her life. And all those things are addressed in a little sad way. And I wasn't a very happy Golala person after completing this book. I think this book has a very specific audience that can read it in a very specific mindset. If you are not in your best mood, I don't recommend you to pick this up. To reading that, I definitely needed a break and a very, very light read, and for that reason, I picked up The Mountain and the Goat. It's a children's book, a graphic book, one at that, and I had a great time reading it because if I read something heavy and then I sit back and stop reading altogether, I go into a slump. So, my personal best way to avoid that slump is to keep reading, but read something that's very light and easygoing and does not take a lot of effort. And for that reason, I picked this up. The story is very cumulative in a classical sort of a way, and it's a okay go one time story that's good to read, where the person in charge of the main storytelling encounters a goat on the mountain singing the melodious song, and from there the whole story takes a different role. So one action consequates into a different reaction, and reaction after reaction keeps taking place until the end goal of the book is met. And that's a pretty entertaining and short sort of a way for a cute little story. So it was, yeah, good for one time read. My next book was a science fiction book, Chicano Frankenstein, which is inspired from the actual Frankenstein story. But in this case, certain scientists have created human beings out of the spare remaining parts of other humans and just put them together to create new humans and try to give life to people who were almost on a dying scenario. They've just given life to those people, and now they are running as automatons in the whole world, and the normal human beings are not taking or looking at them in the best way. They do feel that they need to be eradicated from the society, and all those conjectures are put upon. And the book is discussed from a very political angle because it also showcases the ruling party's interventions around the lifestyles of science as well as normal human beings, and how they are actually controlling the whole mob and putting words into their mouth. And it was a very interesting take from a science and political angle that was addressed into the story. So if that's your jam, go try this out. My next read was Small Hours, which is a fiction book in standard category contemporary world builder, and it also had elements of anthropomorphism, which is basically animals communicating with humans in normal way. That is, they either do the right actions or they speak your tongue. And that element was definitely something that caught my eye, and I really wanted to try this book. And it had that element in form of a fox communicating with a human. The storyline is around a person and his father and the spoiled relationship between them, and how a death in the family actually draws everyone together, and they are still trying to work through their relationships, and the dynamics between them is explained in a very detailed way. I did find this book a little too slow paced for me. I think there wasn't much happening from plot perspective. I think they had a rigid storyline in mind, and the book was going at that pace in the right direction, but there weren't a lot of plot twist for that matter, or any high stake emotions being displayed at different situations. I think it was a very straight, there was no dug of that hard line when you actually read this book, and that was something that I found missing in it. Now comes my favorite genre, fantasy, and there was this book called Bride that I was really looking forward to read, especially from the plot perspective, because it revolved around supernatural creatures such as werewolves and vampires. And that, if that does not spook you up, I don't know what will from reading perspective. Sadly, it was a big uptime disappointment for me because I personally don't like reading smutty books, and this book was at least 70% of it was full of smutty scenes that you just had to skip through while reading the book. Good part though was that you won't really miss any of the plot lines because of that, because there is nothing else happening there. The plot line was fine, but I think the world build-up was also something that was missing for me, and there were just scenes occurring in particular place and there was no exploration, world build-up, scenarios surrounding that place or event that was occurring, which is one thing that is very essential when it comes to fantasy books. And for that reason, I actually give this book a 2 stars. I would have given it a 1 star had this not been a supernatural related story, but those pointers are given for the valid reasons. But rest of it wasn't just something that I would personally recommend people to read. But if you do like smarty books, go ahead, try supernatural romance. I think you will love it if that's your jam. Song of the Huntress is a feminist fantasy tale that has been inspired from the mythology of Hera, the warrior, and from there the whole trope is being scanned into a new story where the world is governed by kings and queens, and the queens in this case are fighting the wars and winning things for crown, whereas the warrior who has been unleashed on their place, she actually tries to infiltrate the palace and get hold of the ruling parties and kill them beforehand. But before the warrior can do that, she sees the queen and she gets attracted to her, and there is this whole new line of romance that is been developing in amongst the enemies and destruction trope. There is also a trope of miscommunication, but to a very limited extent, so that things are interesting but not overwhelming. And that was one reason why I enjoyed reading this book. I have heard so much about other books by this author as well, so I thought I'll try and see for myself, and particularly the world building in this book, such great work. Next up, we have Fogs and Fireflies, which is a middle grade fantasy stories evolving, safeguarding their places, magical elements, and demons around in the forest that are lurking in the shadows to grab yourself and just. It's a very great mystery and fantasy book, but the thing is, you will either love it or you will not at all love it and you'll just run away from it. That's the kind of story. So I would recommend my readers to go ahead and read the blurb of this book, because I have seen some mixed reviews about it. I personally loved this book very much because of the world building, the character development of so many characters within the story. It was like an adventure tale, but it started like a mystical fantasy tale, but then started the adventure part of it, and you just couldn't stop going after that. You'll just keep reading chapter after chapter and you'll simply be engulfed in the whole story. And the story is obviously interesting. I am actually looking forward to see if the author is coming up with new parts of the story, because the way things have ended, it's not exactly a cliffhanger, but there is scope to know so much more about the story without divulging into the details. So I would recommend this to all my middle grade fantasy lovers. And the final book in store for you, also my favorite because I save it for the last, is Olivetti. This is a story told from a typewriter's perspective, and the others' perspective that are mentioned in the story are an introvert boy who is trying to gauge in the place that he's living in. And one day his mom suddenly just disappears and he absolutely has no idea what to do. And since no one else has that established relationship with him where he can talk freely with them, they simply judge him and think that he just wouldn't talk, he's having difficulties growing up, whereas that's not the case. He's just an introvert little boy. So that story is being communicated in here, and how this typewriter is going to help this little boy find his mama and go on this whole adventure of fixing the clues together and discovering what are right things and wrong things to do in life, and just coming face to face and facing those challenges as you are growing up into your teens is something that's illustrated so beautifully. The way the typewriter spoke, it was so witty, and the writing style is also humorous at various instances, that there were so many quotes that I could literally mark up. You can fill this book with all the quotes that the typewriter says. He is simply humorous. And that, my lovely friends, were all the books that I read in the month of March. Do let me know in the comments down below which of these did you like, and hopefully you will pick up for reading up next in the comments down below. I will catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBRs long. Goodbye!